She left me everything. You're just a guest in my house now, old man, so don't get too comfortable." The words didn't just sting. They hung in the humid air of the cemetery like a bad smell you can't wash off. My daughter, Jessica, stood there in a designer black dress that likely cost more than my first car, dry-eyed and smirking, while the dirt was still fresh on her mother's grave. I stood there, clutching Martha's old worn-out Bible, my knuckles white, my hands scarred and stiff from 40 years at the steel mill. Jessica thought those calluses meant I was dumb. She looked at my frayed collar and my silent tears, and she thought she saw weakness. She didn't know I was looking at a snake in the grass. She was already planning the remodel, talking about selling my truck, thinking she'd hit the jackpot because my Martha, God rest her soul, had a soft spot for her only child. But folks, listen to me closely. Jessica forgot one thing. She forgot that I was the one who poured the foundation of that house with my own sweat equity. She forgot who paid the piper for 30 years. She thought she was talking to a broken widower, but she was waking up a sleeping giant. You need to see how this ends. Stick around because the fall is always hardest when you're standing on a pedestal you didn't build. To understand the sheer audacity of what happened at that graveside, you have to go back to the beginning, back to when sweat equity wasn't just a buzzword for house flippers on TV, but the only currency a man like me had in his pocket. I met Martha when we were both scraping by, living on love and ramen noodles in a one-bedroom apartment that rattled every time the train went by. But we had a vision, a dream that we were going to build something sturdy, something that couldn't be blown over by the first hard wind that came our way. And let me tell you, the winds came often. I took a job at the mill, the kind of work that leaves grease under your fingernails that no amount of scrubbing can remove, the kind of work where you shower after you get home, not before you leave. And I worked double shifts, weekends, holidays, missing birthdays and anniversaries because I was terrified of being poor, terrified of not being able to provide for the family we wanted to start. We bought a plot of land that nobody wanted because it was full of rocks and weeds, and I spent my evenings and weekends clearing it by hand, breaking my back moving stones, digging the foundation with a shovel because we couldn't afford a backhoe, pouring concrete until my arms felt like they were going to fall off. And Martha was right there with me, bringing me iced tea, holding the flashlight when I worked past sundown, painting walls, sanding floors, making that house a home with every touch of her hand. We built that nest egg brick by brick, dollar by dollar, saving every penny, never eating out, driving cars until the wheels fell off, patching clothes until they were more thread than fabric, all because we wanted our child to have the life we never did, which is the classic trap, folks. The trap of thinking that giving your kid everything you lacked is the same as giving them character. Listen to me because this is where the road started to twist, and you need to pay attention because I bet you know someone just like this. When Jessica came along, she was our miracle, our little princess. And looking back, I can see where I went wrong. I can see that in my desire to shield her from the harshness of the world, I forgot to teach her how to survive in it, forgot to teach her the value of a dollar, because while I was pulling overtime shifts to pay for ballet lessons and private tutors and brand new clothes, she was learning that things just appeared, that money was this infinite resource that flowed from her daddy's wallet without effort. She never saw the sweat. She never saw the near misses where we almost couldn't pay the electric bill. She never saw the nights Martha cried because we were so tired we couldn't see straight. All she saw was the result, the silver spoon we polished and placed in her mouth. As she got older, the demands got bigger. The sticker shock of her lifestyle started to weigh on me. She wanted a car for her 16th birthday, not a used beater to learn on, but a brand new sedan. And when I tried to say no, Martha, with her heart of gold, would squeeze my hand and say, "Frank, let her have it. We can afford it. Let's make her happy." And I, being a fool in love with my wife, would cave, would pick up extra shifts, would sacrifice my own comfort to put a smile on that girl's face, not realizing I was feeding a monster. By the time she hit college, fully paid for by my retirement savings, mind you, she was already looking down on us, embarrassed by my truck, embarrassed by Martha's coupon clipping, calling us old-fashioned and tightwads while swiping the credit card I paid off every month. She graduated with a degree in something useless and moved back home, not to save money to launch her own life, but because it was easy, because the fridge was always full, the laundry was always done, and the bills were magical things that simply vanished. She became a freeloader of the highest order, bringing home boyfriends who were just as lazy as she was, guys who talked big about entrepreneurship but spent all day playing video games on my couch, eating my food, and looking at me like I was the hired help when I came home exhausted from a 10-hour shift. I tried to talk to Martha about it, tried to tell her we were crippling the girl, that we were raising a moocher who wouldn't know how to boil water if the instructions weren't on an app. But Martha was sick by then. The cancer had started its slow, insidious crawl through her body, and she didn't have the fight in her. She just wanted peace. She just wanted her daughter close, even if that closeness was parasitic. You might think the old man is weak because he loves them, because he didn't kick her out right then and there. But trust me, you're looking at a sleeping lion, a man who was storing up every insult, every eye roll, every ungrateful sigh. The atmosphere in the house changed. It went from a home built on love to a battleground of passive aggression where Jessica would complain about the internet speed or the brand of coffee while her mother was literally withering away in the next room. It broke my heart to see Martha trying to cook dinner while she was barely able to stand just to please Jessica, while Jessica sat on her phone, ignoring the woman who gave her life, ignoring the struggle, completely blind to the reality of mortality. I remember one night I came home and found Martha on the floor. She had collapsed trying to carry a laundry basket up the stairs, Jessica's laundry, and Jessica was in her room, music blasting, totally oblivious. And when I screamed for help, she came out looking annoyed, looking like we had inconvenienced her by having a medical emergency. That was the moment something fractured in me, a hairline crack in the foundation of my fatherly love, seeing my wife, the woman who worked side by side with me in the mud to build this life, being treated like a servant by the child we sacrificed everything for. But I kept quiet. I swallowed the rage because Martha begged me to. "Don't fight, Frank. Please, not now," she would whisper, and for her sake, I played the part of the doting father. I played the part of the ATM. I let Jessica drive the car. I let her use the house like a hotel. I let her treat me like I was invisible. But folks, stories like this matter to folks like us because we know the truth. We know that you can only push a working man so far before he pushes back. The nest egg I had built, the savings I had scraped together for our golden years, was draining fast between Martha's medical bills and Jessica's demands, and I saw the writing on the wall. I saw that if I died first, Jessica would blow through everything in a year and leave her mother destitute. So I started making moves in the shadows. I started visiting a lawyer on my lunch breaks, not the fancy downtown lawyers Jessica liked, but an old buddy of mine from the union days, a guy who knew the law and knew how to protect people like me from predators, even if the predator was your own flesh and blood. Jessica didn't notice. She was too busy planning her future with her mother's money, too busy talking about how she was going to update the house once nature took its course, phrases that made my blood run cold, phrases that made me want to throw her out on the street, but I held the line. I watched her during the final weeks, and it was sickening. She was there physically, but emotionally she was checking the tracking number on an inheritance she thought was guaranteed. She'd come into the hospital room, not to hold Martha's hand, but to ask where the jewelry was kept, to ask about the safe combination, framing it as just wanting to be organized. But I knew, I saw the greed in her eyes, the hunger for unearned wealth. And when Martha finally passed, God rest her soul, the grief nearly killed me. It felt like half my soul was ripped away, and all Jessica could do was talk about the funeral arrangements, not to honor her mother, but to make sure it was a networking event for her friends, insisting on the most expensive flowers, the most expensive casket, all on my dime, of course. She stood there at the wake, accepting condolences like she was the tragic heroine, while I sat in the corner, invisible, just a prop in her performance. She didn't know I was watching. She didn't know I had ears everywhere. She didn't know that while she was playing checkers, thinking she was the queen of the board, I had been playing chess for months. So when she smirked at me at that graveside, when she told me she owned everything, she thought she had won the lottery, but she didn't know that the lottery ticket was already torn up. Stories like this matter to folks like us because we believe in justice. We believe that you reap what you sow, and Jessica had sown a field of thorns. Stay with me, because what happens next isn't just a twist, it's a lesson she'll never forget. The drive back from the cemetery was quiet, the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that screams louder than any shouting match, and I sat in the back seat of my own car while Jessica drove. Her boyfriend, a slick-haired smooth talker named Tyler who had freeloader stamped on his forehead, sat in the passenger seat changing the radio station, flipping through channels until he found some loud, thumping bass that rattled the dashboard I had polished every Sunday for 10 years. I looked out the window, watching the gray world blur by, clutching the funeral program in my hand, thinking about how Martha used to hum when we drove down these streets, thinking about how the house was going to feel so empty without her. But I was wrong, folks, because the house wasn't going to be empty. It was going to be occupied by an enemy force. We pulled into the driveway. The concrete cracked in the corner where I dropped a sledgehammer back in '98, a scar on the land that told a story of work. And before the engine was even cold, Jessica turned to me, the grief mask completely gone, replaced by a cold, business-like efficiency that made my stomach turn. "Dad," she said, not looking me in the eye but checking her makeup in the rearview mirror, "we need to make some changes around here. Mom's stuff is everywhere. It's depressing, and Tyler and I are going to move into the master bedroom because the light is better, so you can take the guest room downstairs." I sat there, stunned, the blind side hitting me harder than a freight train, because my wife wasn't even cold in the ground yet. We hadn't even eaten the funeral ham, and she was already evicting me from the bed I had shared with her mother for 40 years. I tried to speak. I tried to say, "Jessica, this is my house. I built this," but the words caught in my throat, choked by a mix of sorrow and disbelief, and she took my silence for submission. She took it as the old man just nodding along because he's too weak to fight back. They got out of the car and marched into the house like they owned the place, Tyler making a comment about how the front door needed painting, criticizing the sweat equity I had poured into every inch of that frame, and I followed them like a ghost, walking into a home that suddenly felt like a hostile territory. That first night was a blur of disrespect. They ordered pizza and didn't ask what I wanted. They sat in my recliner. Martha's favorite chair was pushed into the corner like a piece of trash, and they talked loudly about their plans, about knocking down walls, about selling off the old junk furniture, which was actually solid oak handcrafted pieces we bought when we finally had a little money. This is where most fathers would crack, where they would explode and throw them out on the street. But this man, he's playing the long game. Watch this. I went to the guest room, a small, dusty room near the laundry layout that smelled of old detergent, and I sat on the narrow bed, listening to them laughing upstairs, listening to the thud of footsteps in the room above me, the room where Martha and I had whispered our dreams in the dark, and I realized with a sinking heart that the invasion had begun. Over the next week, it accelerated. It wasn't a slow creep, it was a blitzkrieg. Tyler moved his stuff in, boxes and boxes of sneakers and gaming equipment, cluttering up the hallway, blocking the pictures of our family vacations, and when I asked him to move them, he looked at me with this smirk, this arrogant little twist of the lip that said, "What are you going to do about it, old man?" and said, "Relax, Frank. Don't have a heart attack. We're reorganizing." He called me Frank, not Mr. Miller, not Sir, just Frank, stripping away any title of respect, treating me like a roommate he was stuck with. Jessica was worse. She started cleaning, which was just a polite word for erasing her mother. I came home from a walk one afternoon trying to escape the noise of their music and found 3 black contractor bags on the curb. My heart stopped. I ripped one open and saw Martha's quilts, the ones she stitched by hand during the long winter nights, the ones that told the story of our life in patches of fabric stuffed in there with coffee grounds and trash. I fell to my knees right there on the sidewalk, my hands shaking as I pulled them out, dirt and coffee staining the fabric, and Jessica came out onto the porch, coffee mug in hand, my coffee mug, and sighed, rolling her eyes like I was a toddler throwing a tantrum. Dad, stop it. Those are old and moth-eaten. They smell like a nursing home. I ordered new bedding, Egyptian cotton. You'll thank me later. She didn't see the history, she didn't see the love, she just saw garbage because it didn't have a designer label. I carried those quilts into the garage, my sanctuary, and hid them in my old tool chest, the only place they hadn't violated yet, and I cried, not soft weeping, but the hard, dry sobs of a man who realizes he raised a wolf. But the physical invasion was only half of it. The psychological warfare was where they really tightened the screws. They started treating me like I was invisible, like a piece of furniture that had outlived its usefulness. They'd cook dinner, these elaborate meals with steaks and wine bought with the money they found in the emergency cash jar I kept in the kitchen, money I saved for a rainy day, and they wouldn't set a place for me. I'd walk into the kitchen, the smell of garlic and rosemary filling the air, and they'd stop talking, the room going silent, and Jessica would say, "Oh, there's some leftover casserole in the fridge if you're hungry," dismissing me while they feasted on my dime. If this disrespect makes your blood boil, you're in the right place, because we're just getting started on the list of crimes. One morning, I went to make my coffee, a ritual I had kept for 30 years, and found the coffee maker gone, replaced by some fancy espresso machine with 1,000 buttons I couldn't understand. "Where's my pot?" I asked, and Tyler laughed, actually laughed, and said, "That dinosaur? We tossed it. Get with the times, Frank." They were erasing my routines, erasing my comfort, trying to make me feel so uncomfortable, so unwelcome in my own home that I would just fade away or leave. But the final straw of this phase, the moment that showed me exactly how dangerous they were, happened on a Tuesday. I came home from meeting with my old union buddy. We were plotting, folks, we were laying the groundwork, and I put my key in the lock, the brass key I had carried since 1985, and it wouldn't turn. I jiggled it, pulled it out, tried again, thinking maybe the tumblers were stuck, maybe my old hands were just tired, but then the door opened and Tyler stood there, blocking the entrance, holding a new shiny silver key. "Oh yeah," he said casually, scratching his stomach. "We changed the locks today. Security reasons. Too many old keys floating around, you know." He didn't offer me a key. He just stood there. I had to ask. I had to stand on my own front porch, the porch I sanded and stained on my knees, and ask this freeloader for permission to enter my own house. "Can I have a key, Tyler?" I asked, my voice low, the rage burning in my gut like a coal fire. He shrugged, fished one out of his pocket and tossed it to me. Tossed it, like I was a dog catching a bone. "Don't lose it, Frank. Copies aren't cheap." I caught that key, and the metal felt cold and sharp in my hand, and I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw the smug confidence of a man who thinks he's won, who thinks the old lion is toothless. He didn't know that every insult was being recorded, every theft was being noted, every moment of disrespect was fuel for the fire that was coming. Jessica was behind him, in the hallway, looking at paint swatches, already deciding what color to paint over the walls Martha loved. "Did you tell him about the garage?" she called out, not even looking up. Tyler smirked. "Oh, right. We need the garage for storage, Frank. My gym equipment is coming. You need to move your truck and those old tools out by the weekend. Put 'em on the street or sell 'em. I don't care." My truck. My tools. The tools I used to build this house. The tools that put food on the table for 30 years. They wanted them gone to make room for a treadmill he would never use. I didn't say a word. I just nodded, gripped that new key until it cut into my palm, and walked past them, down the hall to the guest room. I closed the door, and for the first time, I locked it from the inside. They thought they were taking over. They thought they were evicting me from my life. But all they were doing was digging a hole, a deep, dark hole, and they had no idea I was the one holding the shovel. You need to stick around because the next part is going to show you what a man does when he's pushed into a corner, and trust me, it's not what they expected. I sat on that bed and looked at the picture of Martha I had saved from the trash, and I whispered to her, "Just wait, honey. Just wait." The invasion was complete, but the war had just begun. The nights were the hardest, folks, because that's when the silence of the house battled with the noise of the invaders, creating a dissonance that rattled my very bones. I lay there in that cramped guest room, staring at a ceiling fan that wobbled on its axis, a fan I had installed 20 years ago for my mother-in-law when she stayed with us, and I felt like a stranger in my own life. Upstairs, the bass from Tyler's video games thumped rhythmically, a dull, repetitive thud-thud-thud that vibrated down the studs, the very studs I had hammered into place with my own two hands back in '88. Every thud felt like a disrespect, a heartbeat of entitlement pulsing through the veins of the home Martha and I had built. I turned on my side, the old mattress springs creaking, and reached out instinctively for the other side of the bed, my hand searching for the warmth of Martha's back, for the soft flannel of her nightgown, but my hand met only cold air and the dusty smell of a room that hadn't been aired out in months. That emptiness hit me like a physical blow, a sucker punch to the gut every single night. I closed my eyes and tried to summon her face, tried to hear her voice whispering, "It's okay, Frank, let it go." But her voice was getting fainter, drowned out by the cackling laughter of my daughter and her boyfriend drifting down the vents. It was in these dark hours that the true weight of the situation settled on me, heavier than any load of steel I'd ever hauled at the mill. I wasn't just losing my house, I was losing the memory of my wife. They were scrubbing her away, painting over her favorite colors, tossing out her knickknacks, replacing the smell of her baking with the smell of Tyler's cheap body spray and stale pizza. There's a reason he isn't fighting back yet, folks. A lesser man would have kicked down that door and thrown hands, but when you find out why he's staying quiet, it's going to hit you hard. You see, I spent a lot of time in that room thinking about the nature of sweat equity. To Jessica, this house was just an asset, a number on a Zillow page, a pile of wood and brick that she could leverage for a loan or sell for a quick payday. She didn't know that the floorboards in the hallway squeaked in that one spot because I dropped a hammer there the day we found out she was pregnant, a nervous, jittery father-to-be terrified he wouldn't be enough. She didn't know that the pantry was extra deep because Martha wanted space for canning, a tradition she learned from her grandmother, and I spent 3 weekends framing it out just to see her smile. Every corner of this house held a ghost, a memory, a piece of my soul welded to the structure, and now I was a prisoner in it. I'd wake up at 4 a.m., the old mill habit hard to break, and I'd creep into the kitchen like a burglar, trying to make instant coffee without waking the royalty upstairs. The kitchen was unrecognizable. My old sturdy table where we paid bills and graded homework was covered in their junk, mail, keys, energy drink cans, a laptop open to a page browsing luxury cars. It made my blood boil, but I forced myself to breathe. I forced myself to be the gray rock, uninteresting, unemotional, invisible. I retreated to the garage, my last bastion, my fortress of solitude, before the sun came up. Tyler had threatened to clear it out, but he hadn't done it yet. He was too lazy to lift a finger before noon. I'd sit on my old stool, surrounded by the smell of sawdust, oil, and gasoline, the perfume of the working man, and I'd run my hands over my tools, my socket wrench, my circular saw, the level that had ensured this family stood on straight ground. These weren't just objects, they were the extensions of my hands that provided the food Jessica grew up eating. I picked up an old photo album I had stashed in the tool chest, safe from Jessica's cleaning rampage. I flipped through it, seeing pictures of Jessica as a child, riding on my shoulders, her missing tooth smile so innocent, so full of love. "Daddy, look!" she'd scream in those memories. I looked at that photo and then looked at the ceiling where the adult Jessica was currently sleeping off a wine hangover, and I tried to find the connection. I tried to find the line that connected that sweet girl to the woman who threw her mother's quilts in the trash. It's a pain only a parent knows. The grief of realizing your child is gone, replaced by a stranger with the same face. I realized then that the Jessica I loved was dead, buried right next to Martha.